Joined today by an old friend from the high school football days, Robert Mason, a self-employed general contractor out of Houston who's currently studying and considering going into the nursing profession. And I'm curious, the first question is because so many um, white people tend to look only at the murders of unarmed black people
Right.
and label it an isolated incident without recognizing the connected culture of nonviolent but unconstitutional police harassment and non-lethal police brutality. It's all tied in together. The protests, the Black Lives Matter movement, Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, it's all tied in together. It's not simply or only the murders of unarmed black people. And so I'm curious, have you had any negative experiences dealing with police that you felt were unwarranted and or perhaps of a racial nature?
Yes, I've had actually several. I think, oh man, non-violent and violent or whatnot. So yes,
Would you mind sharing one of those stories with us? If
I want to tell you about a story that actually ended up being my eye opener, if you will. I want to say I was a sophomore in high school, and my house. I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. So we looked a little different, which was fine. When we started driving, which was about the age of 15, 16, the guy that could drive was 16. So we get stopped all the time. First few times we say, look, all right, we look fairly out of place or whatever, but y'all know who we are now. So stop it, leave us alone, whatever. We get pulled over all the time. Lived on the street with the cul-de-sac, and every time we get around into that cul-de-sac, there was somebody coming. At that time, it was not HPD, but it was constables that were employed by the neighborhood. Anyway, so on one particular, I should say first that my house, we ended up taking in strays, I guess is the best way to put it. There were at any given time probably 6 to 7 different kids that lived in my house. I don't know if you remember Damon Gray and Devlin Gray or whatnot, but
yes,
they living with, I think Damon's mom died. So the both of them came and ended up living with us for a couple of years. We have another good buddy. I call him my brother because we grew up together. But he showed up at the door one day in the 7th grade, and he's been there still ever since. Anyway, that said, there was a bunch of black males at that house, and we had one white friend named Jason Smith. Jason Smith hung with us. He was like a brother to us. So this particular day, I want to say there were 7 or 8 of us at the house. Jason was one of them. I'm going to emphasize that because it's a part of the story. He was there. I'm sure there was some girl, or I know there were some girls there because that's what the disruption ended up being. All we see is a girl come flying out of the house, and Jason's behind her, and they got in some kind of argument. So she runs across the street to the neighbor's house, and she decides she's going to call the police. So I tell them all, hey, let's go back inside. We'll figure out what's going on. Jason, what'd you do? What happened? Like nothing. We just started arguing. I don't know what the true story was with that or not, but that was his version of it as we started arguing, or whatnot. Anyway, time goes on. Police show up at the house. I walk outside. It's my house. And they pull a gun out and they say, hey, you and everybody that's in this house needs to come out. We're investigating a wreck. So I say, okay. We all come out. Everybody's talking about the story, telling what happened. The girl comes over because now she feels guilty. And she says, no, I didn't get raped. That's not what happened. I was just pissed off at him, pointing to Jason Smith and saying, that was a problem. It's that, if I can just go home, I'm fine. Thinking in the story, not in the story. So they line us up on the curb. And repeat, at my house, there was probably 7 of us, and they separate Jason. He's on one side of the driveway. The rest of us on the other side of the driveway. They walk over to him and they give him a lesson, or they're trying to teach him a lesson full of expletives about why he doesn't need to let us be at his house, and the destruction we're going to really bring, the trouble that we're going to bring with it, and this, that, the other, everything is going to happen to him because of the actions of us. Now remember, the police were called because of something initially that he was supposed to have done, yet he was separated from the rest of us as we were berated, called pretty much any expletive that you can think of. I haven't done nothing at this particular time. I had the gun pulled out on me, not for answering the door at my house as they streamed us out. At this point, I think there's maybe 6 or 7 police cars, and everybody had a hand on the hip. Nobody pulled a gun out, after that or whatever, but everybody had their hands out, ready and willing, I'd imagine, if need be. So that said, time goes on, police officer comes over to us. I guess the main officer, or first officer on the scene, and he just lets us have it. Jason's still on the other side of the driveway, and he walks over there, and I audibly hear him say, "You need to not let them be at your property, your house anymore, because it's going to lead to nothing but problems for you." Right? Police officers drive off. Everything's good. I wasn't going to tell my dad, about it or whatnot. And, we're all talking about it. We're all kind of angry about it. Jason, it's a little funny to him or whatnot. At the time, I think we were 15, 16. I don't know what it was. And so it didn't make that big of an impact on them at the particular time, but it did on me. And the reason that it disturbed me so much is because sitting there, I wasn't so much worried about the abuse from the police or whatever it was. I just, in my mind, I knew that officer, that in his mind, there was absolutely no way that any of us, other than Jason, could have lived in that house. My father did well for himself, and so it's a nice house, whatnot. But it never once dawned on them or became a consideration that even though I opened the door, could have owned that house, been in that house, been the person that was there. They literally took the point from the jump that because Jason was white, there's no other reason that it would have been. That was his place. We were corrupting it somehow. And that was just kind of that. But, 15, 16, you stay angry for a little while, whatnot. And then the next day, you get called on by another police officer pulling into your driveway. And it's more of a drive-by, like, hey, we see you type of deal. And you go through that for, another 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, however long it takes. And from time to time, it's like, hey, we're going to keep watching you because you're going to do something. And so that experience in itself bothered me, I think, more than a physical experience that I had a police officer at some other time. Just because there was no possibility that we were doing anything right. The way the story played out, the girl admitted that, hey, she called Jason. And I'm not trying to pin this on Jason because it wasn't his fault either, But that was the only scenario in which they could envision with the way everything played out.
Did you see the white lady who called the cops saying that the black bird watcher in Central Park was?
Yeah, I did.
That must have made you think right back to this.
Did, but oh man, it's I was, there's things that have happened that have been worse than that to an extent. It was the first time that happened in that regard, but it wasn't the first time somebody called the police on me or somebody that I was with and it wasn't true, whatnot. So when I saw it, as much as I hate to say this, I was just kind of like, figures, I guess desensitized would be the right word. I get worried about my son. And quickly, I'll tell you that the other day, my daughter was coming home from the store, Walmart or whatever it was, and she pulled around the corner and she got the cop car pulled her over, and she said that she was shaking so hard and she was so upset that the officer apologized to her and said that, wasn't going to give her a ticket. Just go home. Everything's okay. Slow down or whatnot. But she just sat there and sweat and cried. She was scared. And I don't think that she's ever had an experience. I know she hasn't had one that she's talked to us about to where there was per se a negative interaction with the police, not in regards to that. But she just heard me talk about the stuff over the years, that have happened. Because I tried to tell them, most of what's going on in my life. And she just, and that upset you, at that point. I know it's, so when I see the bird guy, it irritates you, but it's just kind of, you say, that's Karen, and you keep on moving. You just, at some point, some of those things, you look back, as sad as it is, you just laugh them off and keep on going.
And I'm also curious with a standard follow-up for this series of videos. The 10 black men that you're closest to,
Right.
How many of them have similar, maybe not as bad, maybe a little bit worse? How many of them have stories of being unjustifiably and unconstitutionally harassed or non-lethally brutalized by the police? How many of the 10 have similar stories?
Well, at the time, like I said, at the house, there were 6 or 7 of us, so that's most of them right there. I was coming back. Actually, the first week I was at Baylor, I left Houston, so I didn't get in trouble. The summer after my senior year, and I had my dad drop me off, and I said I'll just figure it out with knocking on apartment doors. Anyway, on the way back, the first week that I was there, another incident happened, and there were 3 of us in the car at the time. So I guess that makes it 8 or 9. Um, I could think of several more. I remember another time being in Fifth Ward, something happening or whatnot. There were 3 or 4 of us. So, I mean, if you're looking for 10, I can tell you 12 or 15.
So would it be fair to say that you don't think that police harassment toward black people is isolated? You think it's
Oh.
common?
Yeah, no, I mean, it happens. And, my particular um, uh, group of friends, peers or whatnot, I mean, they're big guys, most of them. And so, I mean, it just happens. And, we go, not per se at Baylor because you live with your own bubble or whatever there at the time. I mean, there just wasn't much to do, but you can get out and about around town. I mean, it happened to you just like that.
Well, it sucks that you have had to deal with this. I admire you for uh, being able to find coping strategies to
Yeah,
let as much slide off as you can,
right,
just to be able to live your life in as mentally a healthy way as possible.
right.
But Robert, I really appreciate you taking some time to share your stories,
Yeah, no problem.
and I hope that we can get. Uh, I hope we can spread the word far and wide that none of this stuff is isolated, because I
Right,
feel like that misperception on the part of white racial moderates has a lot to do
right, right,
with why there are not enough white allies fighting alongside black
yeah,
people for our nation to finally get it right and live up to the words in our creed.
right.
So I really appreciate you so much. Thanks for your time.